So, you ready for this? We're going deep today. Deep into the world of babies.
Babies.
Well, not just babies, but how those first interactions, between a baby and their caregiver,
Mm.
how those actually end up shaping the brain.
Like literally wiring the brain differently.
Literally.
Yeah.
You sent over this chapter, Attunement and Attachment, and it's pretty mind-blowing. We're
Yeah.
talking about how those early connections, the way a baby is cared for, how that builds the pathways in the brain, the ones responsible for things like attention, how we handle our emotions, all that.
That's a lot to put on those first few months.
Right. So we're going to break it all down. We're going to look at what this chapter says about those key elements, attunement and attachment, and see what it all means, because it's kind of a big deal.
Sounds like it.
Okay, so right off the bat, the chapter talks about the mothering figure. And, I think it's important to point out, they're not just talking about mom here.
Right. Could be dad, a grandparent, adoptive parent, anyone who's that main caregiver.
Exactly. It's whoever's that primary nurturing figure in the baby's life. And what they're saying is all those crucial areas of the brain, the parts that control our attention, self-control, those don't just develop automatically. They're actually built in response to the emotional interaction with that main caregiver.
So it's not just about genes. It's about how that back and forth, that emotional dance between the baby and the caregiver actually shapes how the brain develops.
Right. It's this dynamic thing.
Yeah.
And get this, the author even suggests disruptions in those early emotional interactions could be a big part of why some people develop ADD later on. It's like, wow, that's how far back it goes.
Yeah, that really makes you think about just how important those first relationships are, huh?
For sure. And, what's at the core of all this is, a kind of communication that's not even spoken. It's this deep emotional connection that happens between babies and their caregivers before they can even talk.
Right, because, think about it. For months, babies can't use words, so they're completely tuned in to their caregiver's emotions.
Yeah, it's all about feeling. Like the way the caregiver looks at them, the tone of voice, how they're being held, it's all communicating how that caregiver is feeling inside. And babies, they pick up on every little thing.
They're like little sponges soaking it all up.
Totally. And what's wild is that the baby's brain, it's so sensitive at that stage, anything that might threaten the caregiver's emotional stability, the baby feels that too.
It makes sense, though, when you think about it. They're completely dependent on that caregiver.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of dependence, the chapter actually highlights this incredible sensory connection that happens right at birth.
Oh, you mean about smell?
Yeah. So like within minutes of being born, a mother's smell actually triggers this huge growth spurt of nerve cell connections in the baby's brain.
It's like, boom, instant brain building.
Right. And then get this.
Mm.
By just 6 days old, babies can already tell their own mother's scent apart from other women.
Wow. So even before they can see clearly, they're already building this bond through smell.
It's primal, like deep down in our biology. Then, as the baby's vision starts to develop, we see this shift towards those visual cues. Like somewhere between 2 and 7 weeks old, babies really start zoning in on their mother's face, or whoever their main caregiver is, of course.
And it makes sense. Faces are how we communicate so much.
For sure. But then, around 17 weeks, things get even more interesting.
How so?
Well, at this point, babies start focusing more on the eyes than the mouth. Like their gaze is drawn to the eyes more intensely.
It's like they're looking right into the brain.
That's exactly what the chapter says. They call it the visible portion of the mother's central nervous system.
That's pretty wild.
I know, right? And it actually connects to this idea from Scientific American. They talk about how the eye can be seen as like an extension of the brain.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Fascinating stuff.
So during those intense moments of eye contact, it's like the baby's right brain is literally reading the mother's right brain. It's like this unconscious mirroring is happening, an emotional connection all through the eyes.
That's deep. Literally seeing into each other's minds.
Right. And then you bring in pupils. The chapter points out that dilated pupils, when they get bigger, it's not just a physical thing. It actually means interest.
So basically, bigger pupils, more interested you are.
Exactly. And studies have even shown that babies, they smile more when they see someone with dilated pupils.
Oh, wow. So it's like this hidden language. Bigger pupils, more engagement, more smiles.
Totally. Even something as small as pupil size plays a role in this whole emotional exchange. It's incredible.
It is.
And the chapter really emphasizes the power of those little glances, those shared looks. It says that even those quick moments of eye contact can cause some pretty big shifts both physically and emotionally.
Especially for newborns, right? They're so tuned into all of that.
Yeah, their brains are still developing, so those interactions really shape things.
It makes you realize how much we underestimate the power of a simple look.
For sure. And, all of this kind of sets the stage for understanding how a mother's mood, like if she's happy or depressed, can actually affect how a baby's brain develops.
Right. The chapter talks about the study from the University of Washington in Seattle, and they looked at this exact thing.
Yeah, I was fascinated by that. They were looking at the electrical activity in babies' brains, and they compared babies whose moms had postpartum depression to babies whose moms didn't.
And what they found was really interesting because it mirrors what we know about adults. Positive emotions, they usually show up as more electrical activity in the left side of the brain, and depression often shows up as less activity in that same area.
Right, so basically happy brain, more activity on the left. Depressed brain, less activity on the left.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see if that same pattern would show up in babies.
Exactly. And they looked at those brain activity patterns while moms were playing with their babies.
So what they find?
Well, the babies with moms who weren't depressed, they showed a lot more activity in the left frontal part of the brain, especially during those happy, playful moments with their moms.
So that's what you'd expect, right? Happy baby, happy interaction, more activity in that left frontal area. But what about the babies whose moms had depression?
Well, they didn't show that same increase in activity. Even when their moms were really trying to engage with them and be playful, their brains didn't respond the same way.
That's pretty powerful, isn't it? Like, even though the moms were trying, the babies weren't getting that same boost in brain activity.
Exactly. And the chapter points out that those effects were happening specifically in those frontal areas of the brain, which are crucial for developing emotional self-control. Being able to manage your emotions.
So it's suggesting that the mother's emotional state is directly influencing how those crucial parts of the baby's brain are developing.
Yeah, and the study didn't just look at brain activity. They also observed how the babies were behaving. And they noticed that the babies whose moms were depressed, they tended to be less active overall, they avoided eye contact more, they weren't as smiley, and they got upset more easily.
It's like the mom's depression was creating this whole different emotional environment for the baby.
Right, and the chapter ties this back to some research by Dale Hay, and his work suggests that if a baby experiences a lot of maternal depression in those early months, it can actually mess with their ability to pay attention later on.
So that's huge. Just saying these early emotional experiences, they don't just affect how we feel, they also shape how we think and learn.
Exactly. And to really drive home this point about how crucial that moment-to-moment emotional connection is, the chapter describes this fascinating experiment called the double TV experiment.
Oh yeah, I was curious about that one.
So they had moms and babies interacting through these closed-circuit TVs. They could see each other and respond in real time, like a video chat.
So they're seeing each other, they're reacting to each other's smiles and sounds. Makes sense.
Right, it's all natural. And as you'd expect, the babies were happy, engaged, loving it.
But then they did something sneaky.
Right. Without the moms or babies knowing, they started playing back a recording of the mother's happy responses from just a minute earlier.
So the baby's still seeing mom on the screen, she's still smiling, everything looks the same.
But here's the thing. Even though it was mom and she was happy, the babies totally freaked out. Like they got really distressed.
Just from seeing the recording.
Yeah, it was almost as bad as those still face experiments, where the mom just goes blank and stops reacting to the baby completely.
Wow. So it wasn't enough for the mom to just be happy. The babies needed something more.
Exactly. And that's where attunement comes in. The chapter talks about attunement as this deep sharing of emotional space. It's not just about what emotions the mom is showing, but about how those emotions match up with what the baby is feeling in that exact moment. Like, is mom responding to me right now?
So it's about mom being right there with the baby emotionally, like feeling what they're feeling.
Exactly. And when that's missing, even if mom looks happy, the baby can tell.
It's like they can sense that disconnect.
Yeah. And the chapter makes it clear that if a mom is really stressed out, that can really mess up her ability to be attuned to her baby. And that can, in turn, actually hurt the baby's brain development.
So being stressed isn't just bad for mom, it's bad for baby too.
Right. It's all connected. And they say that this attunement thing, it's crucial for those brain pathways and neurochemical systems to develop normally. The ones that control attention and how we regulate our emotions.
It's the foundation for all that.
Yeah, pretty much. And it has to be genuine. It's not like you can fake it. The chapter talks about how a real smile and a fake smile, they might look the same, but the brain signals are totally different.
Really?
Yeah. And babies, they can pick up on those subtle differences. Like they can tell if you're faking it.
So you can't trick a baby.
Nope. And get this, they're actually better at spotting fake emotions than adults are.
That's wild. I guess adults, we kind of get used to people faking things, you know?
Right, we're so used to social masks and all that. But babies, they're still totally tuned in to those real, raw emotions.
So who's really in charge of this whole attunement thing? Is it the mom or the baby?
That's a good question. And the chapter brings up John Bowlby's work, which suggests that it's actually the baby who leads.
The baby.
Yeah, the baby sets the pace. They decide when to connect and when to pull back based on what they need in that moment. And the mom, if she's attuned, she follows the baby's lead.
So it's like a dance, and the baby is the choreographer.
Exactly. And if the mom is tense or depressed, it can be really hard for her to get in sync with the baby. She might miss cues, overreact, or not respond in a way that the baby needs.
Makes sense. If you're not feeling good yourself, it's harder to be present for someone else, especially a baby.
Yeah, and the chapter even suggests that some of the challenges kids with ADD have, with reading social cues and stuff, could be traced back to those early interactions. Like maybe their caregivers weren't able to consistently read their cues because they were too stressed or distracted.
So it's like a cycle. If the caregiver can't read the baby's cues, then the baby doesn't learn how to read cues either.
Right. And the chapter also talks about how important it is for the mom to be okay with those little breaks in the connection, when the baby looks away or takes a pause.
Like they need a timeout.
Yeah. It's how babies regulate their emotions, like a way to cool down their nervous system. But a mom who's anxious might see that break as a bad thing and try to force the baby to re-engage.
Which would backfire. Right.
Totally. It actually disrupts the baby's natural way of calming down and messes with that attunement process.
So what happens if a baby just doesn't get enough of that attuned interaction? Like, what are the long-term consequences?
Well, the chapter suggests that they might end up feeling emotionally isolated, like no one really understands them, and that feeling can carry over into later relationships, making it hard to really connect with the people.
That's so sad.
It is. And, we've been talking a lot about attunement, but the chapter makes it clear that this is just one piece of the puzzle. It all fits into this bigger concept of attachment.
Attachment, right. Like that basic human need to feel connected and safe.
Exactly. And for babies, attachment is everything. They literally depend on their caregiver for survival.
And the chapter says this need for attachment, it's not just a human thing.
Oh no, it goes way deeper than that. It's hardwired into all warm-blooded animals, especially mammals. It's like a biological imperative. We need to connect.
Wow. So it's not just about feeling good, it's about survival.
Right. And for us humans, that need for attachment, it doesn't just go away when we grow up. It stays with us. It might shift from our parents to our romantic partners, our friends, even our own kids later on.
So it just keeps evolving.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that the chapter suggests that when those attachment needs aren't met in healthy ways, we might try to fill that void in other ways, like through addictions, spending too much time online, or even getting super involved in certain types of religion.
So it's like we're always searching for that connection, that feeling of belonging.
Yeah, and they even connect it to pop culture. Like, think about how many songs, movies, and books are about love, loss, heartbreak, and finding connection. It's a universal theme.
It really is. And the chapter brings us back to ADD again, saying that those kids with ADD who didn't have that consistent loving connection with their parents when they were little, they might have more severe ADD as adults.
It's like those early experiences, they can have repercussions for years to come.
It really makes you appreciate how much power those early relationships have.
Yeah. And finally, the chapter shares this really powerful observation from Stanley Greenspan. He's a child psychiatrist. And he talks about how amazingly sensitive babies are to their mom's emotional state. Well, he says that even if a mom is physically there, taking care of the baby, doing all the right things, but emotionally, she's checked out, the baby can feel it.
So it's not just about being present physically, it's about being emotionally available too.
Exactly. There's this quote from him that really gets to the heart of it. He says, "The infant takes delight in mommy's attention and knows when that source of delight is missing. If mom becomes preoccupied or distracted while playing with the baby, sadness or dismay settles in on the little face."
Wow. So they really do know.
Yeah, and that's why this attunement, this emotional connection, is so crucial.
So as we wrap this deep dive up, I think the main takeaway is this. Those early emotional interactions, especially attunement and attachment,
Mhm.
they're not just about making babies feel good. They're literally shaping the way their brains are wired,
Yeah.
especially the parts that control attention and how they handle their emotions.
And the mom's emotional state, it plays a huge role in all of that.
What blows my mind is how these tiny interactions, these little moments between a baby and their caregiver, can have such a massive impact on their entire life.
It really makes you think about the importance of being present, not just physically, but emotionally present in all of our relationships.
Absolutely. And it sounds like we've only scratched the surface. The chapter ends by saying that the next section is going to dive even deeper into how all this works in the brain, the actual circuitry and neurochemicals involved.
Can't wait to get into that.
Me too. Well, thanks for joining me for this deep dive. I think we both learned a lot today.
Yes, and Ellie.
Until next time, everyone.